Okay, welcome to the Carver Finance Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 19th. It's about 6:35, and we will be broadcast also on Area 58. So if we could start quickly with the pledge, and then we'll get right into it. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good, thank you. And first up tonight is going to be the school department giving us a presentation overview of their budget. We got Scott Neef, superintendent, Ron Griffin, business manager. We thank you guys and appreciate your coming over. And
Thank you.
let's get it started.
Very good.
Ron?
Well, thank you guys for taking a few minutes to chat with us today. What we have for you is an overview of both expenses and revenue for the Carver schools. It's broken up really by sort of the way that the state requires us to structure our budgets, but I would say if at any point you've got a question, just stop me and we'll jump in and dive into any questions or dive into greater detail if you'd like, okay? So this is what we'll look at today. We'll do a quick snapshot. We always want to talk about our budget priorities. We'll focus on revenue, then expenses, and then we'll give you an executive summary of the whole thing. Yeah. A little bit about our schools. I know Bill knows a lot about it, but for the sake of the entire committee, we've got the better part of 1,500 kiddos, pre-K to 12. One of the things we really pride ourselves is, being that small school setting with lots of opportunities. You heard a little bit about our pathways programs and those sorts of things. Those are typically the kinds of programs you see in large high schools, large urban high schools. I think we're fortunate to sort of blend that nice mix of small town community with sort of large town operation and experiences. A little bit about our elementary school, quick highlights there. Big commitment to the arts. You see our annual performances. If you had a chance to pop by the elementary school, they do theater performances. They've got their choral team. It's really incredible.
Lion King tomorrow and
That's
Friday.
right. Lion King, get your tickets.
Drama productions coming up on Thursday and Friday.
That third bullet is really thanks in large part to this community dedicating resources to our school. We have a lot of opportunities at the elementary school for hands-on teaching, for project-based spaces, and it really is that elementary school, that the new building that allows us to do a lot of those things at the elementary school. We feel fortunate to have a community that's invested in that elementary school programming. Over at the middle high school, that first bullet is probably the biggest one that you hear about. Carver's really become a state leader when it comes to pathways programs, innovation pathways. They essentially take these, advanced 22nd century career opportunities and give students this taste of them, right? So advanced manufacturing, things like that otherwise most schools our size don't have. We have these little opportunities where students can dive in deep and check out advanced career paths. We've earned some recognition for those things, as well as some grant funding from the state, trying to help continue to build that. You've seen the athletics. I'm sure you've got swept up with the Super Bowl excitement over the past few years as well. We have an incredible championship caliber program there, as well as a championship caliber culinary team. Again, thanks to the dedication of the communities who are investing in the school department, plus the federal government. We were able to put together resources recently to renovate our culinary program space, and Chef has represented us well at the state competitions year after year. Whenever I talk about budget, Bill's heard me say this probably ad nauseum, so I'm sorry again. I always like to take a moment to remind people that yes, it's going to be about money, yes, it's about numbers, but really your budget is just a reflection of your priorities, right? A reflection of the things that you care about that you want to invest in. Like every community, there's a limited amount of resources, so you can only invest in so many things. I won't go through them here for you, but you've got a copy of this emailed over to you. I'd encourage you to check out the educational blueprint for the district. It really highlights the big four areas that we're focusing resources on. And I'd also encourage you to take a look at the Pathways website if you're interested to learn more about where we're putting those resources in the middle high school to try to keep students here in Carver and attract community members to our schools. So we'll start with revenue. As Ms. Preble always says, everything is built on revenue. We'll talk about revenue in two buckets. The first is like the state and local revenue. This is the stuff you're probably voting on tonight, the warrant number. So I'd like to take a minute to just explain how you get that warrant number for your school department. Every community does it different, so I want to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about that. And the second one, while it's smaller, it is just as important. Grants and offsets. Your school department writes a lot of grants to try to offset the cost of operating your schools. And we bring in lots of other resources to try to find ways to minimize the financial impact on your local community and still provide high caliber education for kiddos. So we'll break it up in those two buckets. Big picture executive summary of your budget is there. So you see your revenue. We'll start by talking a little bit about that bottom section there, which is again that warrant figure. We'll compare it between right now and this upcoming year, and then we'll dive into all of these numbers here, which is essentially your offsets. Your warrant's broken up. Your warrant figure is broken up in a couple of different ways. That very top box is essentially all the revenue in. You all know this, so I'll go relatively quickly. You've got your local levy, plus your net state aid, linked to the cherry sheet for Carver if you want to dive in and take a look at that. Obviously, your local receipts, which everyone talks a lot about. This year, a little bit differently, we have the pilot policy. So our select board recently voted to essentially pull out new pilots out of the overall revenue stream, and any future pilots going forward as well would do the same thing. So going into FY26, you're pulling out the better part of $100,000. That'd be set aside to go toward things like capital and stabilizations of long-term investments for the community and not utilized for day-to-day operation of your services, right? So all in, you're looking at the better part of $51.2 million. This next section is really unique to every community. This is not driven by statute or regulation. This is purely the decision of any given community. Every community does it a little bit differently. The way Carver structures its fixed liabilities, it says, hey, look, there's a bunch of these things that all departments throughout the community need, so we're going to take those off the top of the total revenue. All in, you're at about 14.1 million, things like snow and ice removal that everybody needs, and health insurance for all the employees, and you see the list going right on there. So we take the 51.2, we back out 14.1 before we even talk about how to distribute that to your departments to operate your community, provide services to your citizens. This is traditionally called the splits. So your 51.2 revenue minus 14.1 gives you the better part of 37 and some change for total operating costs. And again, local decision, the way that's structured here in Carver, you've got 68 and some change percent that is dedicated to your school department, and the remaining percentage goes to the remaining general operation of all things government. All in, that represents about a 4.8% increase from FY25 to FY26 for a total of about $25.4 million. I went quick, but I know this group is the finance group. Do you have any questions on that?
The only question I have is, you had made reference to an email that had some links that in the previous slide regarding the blueprint.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't. Who did you send that to?
Again, I sent it to Pat.
No,
Did
and
you get it?
I forwarded it to everybody.
Okay, that was
So-
okay.
so
So it's the same
that's
thing.
in
I did.
there.
Okay, so I got it. Okay,
Brilliant.
thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And if you look at it later and you have questions, like give me a call, email me. I'd love
Sure.
to talk to you more about it if you're keen about it. So, big picture, 25.4 million is the dollar amount that you'll see on the warrant there, and that's how they get that number, right? The second part are the offsets and grants. Again, it's a small part of our budget, but I think it's an important part because it all has strings attached to it, right? Especially now with the hyper focus on sort of the federal revenue streams. I'll share a little bit about this with you. So there's maybe 4 big buckets of resources that come in through grants and offsets. Each of them are tied to a specific area in the budget and are required to be spent on certain things. Yeah. I'm going to start with circuit breaker. This is one that's really important to us, and we'll dive into the expenses a little bit later as well. Over the past couple of years, Carver and most districts in the Commonwealth have faced a real significant increase in the number and the severity of special education needs in districts. Meaning, you've got more and more kiddos who can't be served by your typical traditional school district and end up having to be served by what are called specialized schools, out-of-district placements. So that has spiked across the Commonwealth, both in terms of cost, which is regulated by the state, and the sheer number. What the state does is part of your state budget, they do an annual appropriation affectionately called circuit breaker. Essentially, the state says, hey, look, communities, they're your kiddos, so you gotta have some skin in the game. So you pay, for simplicity's sake, $50,000 per student. But then, more than that, the state's gonna give you a partial reimbursement. So that's why you see your circuit breaker, for example, going from 25 to 26, essentially doubling. Because our cost from 24 to 25 essentially doubled. It's a year in arrears, but it helps offset significant impacts in all things special education out of district costs. That's probably one of the most significant changes that you're gonna see in these annual offsets year to year. Lastly, you should probably expect circuit breaker to flatten out in 27, 28, 29. I can't promise that, but our enrollment in out-of-district kiddos and the state's regulation on the pricing has leveled out, so you'd expect that to follow again a year in arrears. The other couple that are interesting to keep in mind are these grant offsets. They're your federal grants. The two largest we have is called IDEA, and the other is Title I. You may have heard a lot about those recently because they've sort of come into the spotlight as there's been this federal debate around which federal programs should continue on and which kinds of resources should go out to states and communities. So you do see a reduction there from 25 to 26. That's just your school department being conservative, hedging the bet. Right now, the feds haven't indicated that they're planning to cut those two programs, but there has been talk around them. So the landscape's a little shaky, so we're being hyper-conservative on that number.
And the continuing resolution that was passed last Friday?
Mm.
That funded
Those
IDEA in Title I in full through September 30th. Through the federal government's fiscal year.
Can I ask a question? So you had mentioned that you think that the circuit breaker is gonna flatten out.
Yeah,
Are we talking, going forward, it's gonna be at the
at that level.
The $1 million
126? I won't just keep increasing it, but it'll stay there.
It'll likely flatten out. And
Okay.
that sort of meets our existing, we'll talk about the expenses, but last year we had a deficit pretty substantial. And so we had to do two things. One, reduce some of the expenses, right, in some ways through staffing. And the other, use some one-time money to like close that gap, knowing this was coming.
Okay.
We also applied for a grant to sort of help some of that. But yes, the short answer is that should level out to sort of meet our existing expenses. Super good question.
Do you know if we have any grants from the state that would be at risk through the
MBTA?
MBTA?
There's not, I went through the list the other day. None are currently listed specifically, but there is one department that is broadly listed that we work with through our Innovations Pathways. It hasn't listed the Innovations Pathways grants, but it does list one of the departments that sort of feeds into our Innovations
Okay.
Pathways. So short answer, no. Long answer, could it be? Possibly.
But we don't have any innovation pathway grants next year.
Not for 26.
So we've already spent the innovation pathway grant monies we received.
Okay, because
So we don't have-
heard,
We don't have a new grant coming in for innovation pathways.
even though education isn't supposed to be touched, they are getting to the schools through some other avenues, and they're even pulling grants that were awarded, and the money hasn't been spent.
Are
So make sure
you
spend the money.
talking about not complying to the,
I'm assuming that this town is not gonna comply with the
and
MBTA.
then, so they're threatening to pull grants, that's right.
They're actually, and they're doing it to other towns who
Mm.
have announced their non-compliance.
I don't know the answer to that question, if they're all spent down, all of our innovation pathways grants.
They're not currently for FY25,
Yeah.
no. And some of them we don't get annually, some of them we get sort of
They're like
every
one
other
time,
year.
yeah.
Yeah, but noted, and we will make an
Yeah.
effort to use that state money.
Yeah,
But
it
a
came up
good-
last night.
Yeah, a
with
good,
the,
a good portion of it's been
the-
spent.
our-
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Our senator and representative were here last night.
And that was
going
their
over what was really
advice.
happening.
Yeah.
If I could, just so you're aware, so we are in interim compliance until December 31st, 2025. So I would think the FY '25 grants are in good shape. FY '26, again, there would be a concern. You know, so right now we're in interim compliance, but there was recently, it was Middleborough,
Yeah.
they revoked a grant that had actually been granted to them. You know, they tried to pull it back. I believe Senator Dooner said they worked with the state to get that money back to the town, but still, you know, it's concerning.
And hopefully there's some legislation, maybe extensions involved and whatnot, so hopefully something like that will come through and we can kick the can down the road for a couple
sure.
of years.
We should be okay on the school side.
Mhm.
Yeah, nothing operational,
Yeah.
even if it was one of those. Good questions on those. One last one I'll just share a little bit about is, again, it's an annual offset that we get typically every year. That's called school choice. A little bit about school choice. There's some statute that essentially allows districts to choose, if they want to, open up seats, enrollment, to community students in other districts. Typically they're surrounding, but they don't have to be. And the state organizes essentially a transfer of funds from that district, it's $5,000 per kiddo, to the receiving district to essentially offset the costs. Why is that helpful? Two reasons. One, what you see on the right there is your enrollment in your school district from 1996 to 2024. It's the most recent data they have. In blue is your just regular enrollment kiddos who show up to your schools every day. That orange cap that you see represents your school choice students. This graphic is typical of 75% of all the school districts in the Commonwealth. There's been declining enrollment across the Commonwealth for school-age children across the board.
What are they
Yes.
doing? Where are all those kids?
There's just
The
less of
population is getting older.
Just getting, yeah.
So if you think about Carver's population in that time, it's pretty stable. It's just gotten older.
Oh, I see. So
Yeah,
they
it's a-
aged out, they aged
yeah,
out of
there's
school?
there's just less kids.
Gotcha.
And families
Now,
moving away.
And then there's two factors. And then the other factor is beginning probably around as early as 2006, 2007, but really after 2012, students also have more choices. There's been an increase in charter schools, Rising Tide in particular in Plymouth, MAP Academy, which opened 5 or 6 years ago in Plymouth. So it's a combination of kids have more choices, right? And then also the population is just aging, and there's fewer kids who live in Carver. So that's what leads to that. That's what's representative of that decline. One of the things I do present to the school committee every year, generally in November after all this is all based on October 1 day. That's where we have to report. That's our official population for the year. They just take a day, October 1st, where's everybody in the state, how many kids you have on October 1st. So that's always the benchmark. So then after the October 1 data goes in, I'll do some comparisons. And one of the things I track is the percentage of school-age students who are currently living in Carver that attend school someplace else, right? And 15 years ago, that was about 10 or 11%. Now it's about 14%. It was like 14.6 this year, or something like that. It was in the 14s.
Mhm.
So there's been about a 3 or 4% increase in students choosing other opportunities, just because there's more opportunities. There's more choices for them than there was 15 years ago. But really, the biggest impact on that decline is just the number of aging population, number of kids in Carver without a lot of growth in population in Carver.
And do you guys have vision to the, you said the state will pull funds from another town for kids going on. Do you have visibility to that to make sure the accountability is good?
Oh,
Yes,
We audit
Yes.
that essentially.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
A couple times a year, in both directions.
Yeah,
Right, right.
And same way. So, and currently, I only know these numbers because we just did it at school committee, because we just voted for school choice on Monday night. Currently, we have 77 students enrolled from other towns, and we have 8 schools. We have 8 students choicing out. So we're 69 to the positive in school choice.
What grades do you still let in?
The school committee voted to let in 5 kindergarten and 9 through 12. So nothing 2 through 8.
Oh, really?
So we
Okay.
do 5 slots in kindergarten and 5 slots in grades 9 through 12.
Mhm.
What we found for 9 through 12 is several of those slots actually get taken by kids whose families move out of town, but they've been in school for Carver for,
7, 8 years.
7, 8, 9, 10 years, and they want to just stay.
Yeah.
So like we have, I think it was 14, if my memory serves right, 14 11th graders who are school choice. Because 5 of them came in kindergarten and probably stayed through. Because
Yeah.
once you come school choice, you get to stay.
Stay, right.
But a lot of those kids are actually Carver kids who moved somewhere along the line and then opted in. In the elementary school, we are a little tight in some of our grades. That's why we don't open up anything besides kindergarten. We bring 5 in, but then we don't keep adding on that in elementary school. We've done middle school at times, but sometimes middle school's been more problematic in terms of students who are coming in through school choice.
As Scott mentioned though, big picture, like we are a community and a school district that families want to come to, right? You can look online on DESE, and there's a lot of districts that are in the negative there, right? Where the families don't feel like it's a school district that is meeting their needs and they're looking for other options. So It helps your budget, and ultimately helps sort of alleviate and flatten out that gradual decline in enrollment. The last bit I'll share with you is one-time offsets. You all know probably better than anybody. Ideally, you don't want to have a slide about one time at all. This should be 0. And again, as I mentioned, in FY '25,
Nice transition.
that was not mine. That was the TV did that for us.
Cool to put that in. That was nice for you to put in.
But as I mentioned last year, we had a real substantial swing in that special education on a district. And so we really had to do that combination of reducing costs, reducing some of the staffing, and using some one-time funding to just make ends meet. So that's what you see there in the FY '25. FY '26, we're still using some. It's in the right direction. Goal should be at 0. This is just a graphic of essentially what we've talked about. In blue is your Chapter 70 local taxes. That's the warrant number, right? Then you've got those annual offsets there, right? The IDEA and Title I, those sorts of things. And then the topper that you see is those one-time. So again, right direction, but prefer to have that.
I don't know if we're going too far into the weeds, if you can tell us we are, but if you want to go back a couple slides on, back to the front. So you may have heard, or there's discussions in the news about what's called the Student Opportunity Act, which increases Chapter 70 funding for school districts. And there are some districts that have seen a huge increase in their state aid, the Chapter 70 funding. That formula is based solely on student population. And so since we've had a declining population, we haven't seen a tremendous benefit from the Student Opportunity Act. Other districts have. The districts that have are the districts that have maintained their population. So I live in Taunton. Taunton's population has actually grown a little bit. And they've received a huge benefit in Student Opportunity Act funds. And what it does is it gives additional monies for students who are in special education, English as a second language, low income. But it also, you have to have maintained a population over the last 10 years. So I forget the percentage, it's 2/3.
233 districts.
233 districts. We're one of 233 districts that are not seeing any benefit from the Student Opportunity Act. So 2/3 of the districts in Massachusetts aren't seeing a real benefit from that. Though it's talked about a lot in the news of how important the Student Opportunity Act is. For 1/3 of districts, it's been great for them. But we're one of the 233 that it has not been a tremendous benefit. So most times we get what's called minimum aid. And so the governor and the Senate and the House will make their budget presentations. They'll set a minimum aid number that your Chapter 70 is going to increase per pupil. And generally, we're a recipient of minimum aid. And the expectation is we'll be a recipient of minimum aid this year. But I wanted to bring that up because I know that's talked about on the news a lot. You hear about the Student Opportunity Act and wanted to know how that impacts Carver.
You said it's by population or by enrollment?
By enrollment.
By enrollment, by student population, not town population. Student
So how
enrollment.
far away are we?
We're pretty far away.
This here has to
Get the back up to.
here.
I don't know. I don't know what the benchmark is.
I want to say it's 2013.
Yeah,
It's
so-
early teens.
So we'd have to increase our population by about 300 students.
Enough to where they're
Yeah, so if we increase our population by 300 students, we would start to see a real benefit from the Student
more
Opportunity Act.
state aid. Yeah.
Now, the interesting part, I know I'm going way deep into the weeds here, is the communities who I don't want to make that as a negative against those communities, because what they would actually argue, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support this, is that those communities have actually been underfunded for many years. And all the Student Opportunity Act is actually bringing them up to the same level we're at. It would be their argument, and I think there's some real validity to that. So I don't want to make it like we're the big losers in the Student Opportunity Act.
Sure.
I just want to make it that, I know it's talked about in the news, I don't know if people heard it and say, hey, how does that impact Carver? So I just wanted to touch base on that a little bit in terms of state aid. Sorry.
No, I had a slide for you.
Oh,
earlier.
you
I got you.
you already, I got ahead of you?
No, you're good, you're good. And I'll do one more, and you can want to add to this as well. This is one of
Well,
my
this is-
favorites,
yes.
because I think it illustrates everything we've been talking about with revenue in one picture for school department like Carver and others that are similar to us. This blue line you see here is that Chapter 70, just Chapter 70. That's the money that the state sends us to help with education, per pupil, Student Opportunity Act, all of that. It's pretty flat, and it continues to be pretty flat, because what Mr. Neef said, it shows that you've got about $30 to $75 a student every year. That's small dollars. The challenge there is that the actual local contribution to make up the difference keeps growing, right? And that's true of Carver and those other 232 other districts. My point is, at some point, the state's gonna have to deal with that in some way. You can't get too much farther apart. It costs a lot to educate kiddos in the Commonwealth. That's just the reality of being in Massachusetts and teaching kiddos. And it means that in some way, we have to rethink Chapter 70 or how we support, again, 2/3 of the school districts in the Commonwealth.
Chapter 78 used to cover close to 50% of the school's budget. And as that shows, every year that gets less. So that means the community has to pick up a larger percentage of the school's budget
Right.
actually year over year. Until that changes. There is some push from the Mass Association of School Committees, Mass Association of Superintendents, to start putting some pressure on legislators to recognize this problem. And I don't know if no one's proposed an exact solution to the problem yet, but at least to start discussing it. That this is, this can't continue for 10 more years or 15 more years.
Right, it's unsustainable. Yeah. But if you take nothing else away from the revenue conversation, this image feels like the encapsulation of how revenue is sort of structured for Carver and honestly for a lot of districts similar to Carver. Any questions on revenues or how the school gets resources, difference between the warrant number gets created versus offsets like grants and so on? Okay.
No one in the audience.
Oh, there's one question.
Circuit breaker money, I think I saw a slide, it went from $500,000 to $1 million, can you tell us what's driving that?
There was, he just missed us.
I missed that back.
Sorry, I came in late.
That's okay, I'll give you a little quick summary here, bear with me a moment. So you're familiar with circuit breaker already,
Yep.
right? So FY25, Carver, like many districts in the state, found themselves with increased numbers of kiddos going out for special education needs, so out of district placements, high need students. And OSD, the state regulates the price of that thing, and so the price rose and the number of students rose simultaneously.
We
And
should
in
actually-
expenses, I'm gonna go into it in like super great detail, but what ends up happening is, because that price increases and the enrollment increases, the overall cost increases. Circuit breaker is designed by the state to help offset that, but it does so a year in arrears.
Yep.
So what you're seeing in 25 was essentially 24's, FY 24's actuals for that cost, a portion of that cost. What you see in 26 is a sort of catch-up for the cost, portion of that cost for special education on a district. In like 4 or 5 slides on expenses, I'll dive into great detail about how that happens and what that looks like.
And I don't know if you're gonna touch on this, but you said the state regulates it. And they usually try to maintain a low growth for those schools. But last year, they made an adjustment, and their adjustment allowed all of those out-of-district placements to increase their tuition by 14%. Some of these placements are $150,000, so you get a 14% increase. All of a sudden, for one student, their price just changed by $25,000 for one kid. So it was the factors of us having more students going out. And actually some of our students moving from one were already in and out of district placement, but moved from one that was less restrictive to more restrictive based on their needs. And then OSD saying, hey, you can raise your prices by 14%. And they didn't all do it, but most of them did. Most of them said, oh, go 14%. That sounds about right. We'll raise our price by 14%.
And Tony had a great question, I'll just echo it for you. So one of the questions was like, hey, when you say it's gonna top out, what does that mean? You're not gonna see additional growth in 27. You're gonna see that figure, give or take a little bit in 27, that 26 figure continuing. Because what it does is, part of circuit breaker, it says, hey, look, communities, they're your children, they live in your town, you're gonna own some of that cost, which is only fair. It's about $50,000 essentially. And then circuit breaker says, but the state is gonna pool some resources and give you a portion of the delta, right? So once you've got an established amount that you're spending, yes, that'll increase based on the increases for the tuition, obviously. But the rough number of children remain, the enrollments remain, the placements remain, so that number is gonna stay steady, plus or minus a few percentages each year. Unless, of course, enrollment changes dramatically, right?
So do you have a estimate of what the cost is per student per year? Do
I
you?
have a slide.
Oh, okay, good.
I got you.
Just
Yeah.
curious.
I won't give you individual kiddos, but I'll give you like examples of what it will look like. I got you. So let's talk about expenses. We'll dive into that. We'll end with out-of-district tuitions and those sorts of things. That's the big one. Pat knows this more than most, right? This is the way that the state requires I organize the money for schools.
Remember
It
it
breaks
well.
it down into those buckets essentially. So that's how I've got to present it to all of you, but we'll dive in and feel free to ask questions that are greater detail. I like to always start with like an executive summary. Here's your big picture. What you've got is 24 budget to actual, 25, that's where I'm right now, and then 26 is what you see as the proposed budget, and then a % delta between 25 and 26. To John's question about like, hey, tell me more about special education, I've highlighted that because when I do a drill down specific about special education, it's gonna be a little bit in the past, because again, all this money is sort of in arrears, but we'll spend some time talking about the 9,000 series where you see the largest increase, and where you've seen over the past few years, the largest increase in your overall cost for your school department. 1,000 series is sort of boring. There's not a whole lot of movement there. It covers legal costs. It covers, your admin, your special education staff, your central office staff, special education admin, central office staff, those sorts of things. We had some minor reductions in costs that are relevant. The school committee did this really cool project where they essentially went over all their policies and modernized it. There was a cost in 25. It's obviously come off the books in 26, so that helped us mediate some of our increases across the 1,000 series. Not super exciting. 2,000 series is your biggest series. I'll give you a couple of highlights. Typical steps and lanes for instructional staff across your CBAs, right? A couple of things that are important to keep in mind. We had increases for summer school programming. The goal there is to sort of reduce the number of students who are having some gap learning over the summer, with the idea that that will help students stay in district, help close those learning gaps, do those sorts of things. We had a copy release that had to be shared with town halls, now in the budget there. Long-term subs have been up based on trend data. For most of our data, unless it's like a specific number, I do 3 to 5 year trend data, and that's how we sort of get our targets. Special education testing assessments and some instructional software. There are 2 new items for the 2000 series in FY26. One is something that's been a long time coming, and I'll certainly defer to Mr. Neef on it, but essentially, most school districts have a fund where they utilize resources to update curriculum regularly. The state changes the standards of how things are supposed to be taught, and then what'll happen is districts then adjust the materials they're using to meet the standard. Carver's sort of been behind in that. We've used a combination of like capital articles over years. Sometimes we just see if there's anything left at the end of the year to do it. It's not a great way to keep your program ahead. And again, our goal, stay ahead of the curve, keep our kids in a good spot now and through to graduation. So we had put some resources in for just that. Long story short, to balance the budget, we had to reduce that by more than half to balance it, but it's a starting place, and hopefully over time, we can build that up to something that's comparable with other districts around us. And we have a new history course in the high school.
One
Say
question,
any more about
just
those?
quick, steps and lanes, I'm just not familiar with the term lanes, is those the grades?
Yeah, so
I know you explained this
teacher
to me
contracts
before.
in the Commonwealth, just like they were in Rochester and other districts, they all work the same way. You have steps for the number of years that you're in, and then lanes based on the degree that someone has. I would say 95% of all districts run in that structure. So like if someone gets a new degree, they get paid more because the idea would be they're contributing more to the school district by bringing some new skill set. And obviously, the steps are simply like a seniority. If you've been teaching longer, you're a more highly qualified teacher typically, you get paid more for that.
Can I just ask a question?
Mhm.
How far behind is Carver for the curriculum from other districts?
That maybe behind was the wrong phrase to use. Behind in terms of not having a curriculum revision cycle. We've updated our curriculum aligns with all the state standards, but sometimes you just need new resources, new materials. So it's not like there's a curriculum that's like, oh, we're not using something that's state approved or the state standard. There's been no money source to do that.
Right.
So as we do that, we find money to do that. What does that mean? We pull a little from this pot, we pull that pot. We had a good year and costs were down and we had $30,000 to buy new books.
Okay, so this is like for books?
Oh, right, this is for books, materials, supplies. We actually had, through a capital item of several years, $100,000 to support the building of our Pathways programs and their curriculum. And that was a capital item. But we're saying we need to put this into our operating budget. It should be in our operating budget. And so we want to build it back into the operating budget. Pat could correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was actually cut. This school district had $100,000 as a curriculum revision line item every year. And that was cut after in 2001, so 23 years ago, and it hasn't come back since then. So since that time, for the last 23 years, we've been doing catch as catch can as the way of doing this. And the concept would be, you take all your departments, English department, you're up this year. You're gonna look at your curriculum, is there anything you need? Do you need new books? Do you need do you need these materials? Okay, next year is social studies, next year is math, next year is science, next year is allied arts. English is back. And we're just going to rotate through all the departments to give them the opportunity to look at what they need to support their curriculum. But I don't want it to be a statement that our curriculum is behind what the state standards are.
Budgeting is behind.
Budgeting is behind. The money, we haven't budgeted line items or money to do that, but it's not that the kids aren't getting state-approved curriculum.
Okay. I just thought that might be like a high priority, that's why I'm surprised.
The 3000 series is your support series, so it's a bit of a grab bag for the way the state structures it. A couple things again, steps and lanes for your nursing staff and transportation happen to be in there. For the upcoming year, we've added some additional in-house transportation. So anytime there's a kiddo who is homeless, or one of these kiddos, for example, who has severe needs, special education disabilities, and has to go out of district, the law requires that the district provide transportation. There's two ways to do that. You can contract that service out, or you can do it in-house. Carver's fortunate, we have an owned and operated transportation program here in our community, and that means it's not for profit. So dollar for dollar, we don't have to get a profit. Everything else that you do in a contract, obviously, the company's gonna take a profit from that. So our goal typically is to try to do things in-house. It saves the taxpayer money, and it gives us more control over what it is, right? That said, we have a limited amount of drivers, a limited amount of vehicles, and so it still is a mix. But that's why you see, like, every year we try to find a way to, if we've got a couple of homeless kiddos, can we get one of those kiddos on one of our vans, rather than paying some transportation company the cost plus their 15% or whatever the markup might be.
Are we still required to pick a student up that moves to another town that may be enrolled in Carver? I remember you mentioned that last year.
Only if they're deemed as homeless.
Homeless.
So if a family is deemed as homeless, then we are responsible, wherever they happen, whether their transient place is, wherever they happen to be living, that family actually has the choice to enroll in that school district or to return to Carver.
Gotcha.
If they choose to return to Carver, then we're responsible to transport them. And there's actually been more homelessness, that's been something that's been on the rise. We're supposed to do a cost share for the transportation costs with the district in which the community lives in. And there's the extreme example right now, we are transporting a student from Tiverton, Rhode Island.
Wow.
Homelessness is the McKinney-Vento is a federal law, it's not a state law, crosses state boundaries. There's a limit in terms of like being real, but technically there's no limit. Technically a student could be homeless and move to New York,
Wow.
and we'd have to split the transportation costs. That doesn't happen because no one's gonna do that. And obviously we're working with this family that's in Tiverton, Rhode Island, saying maybe it makes more sense for you to enroll the kids in Tiverton because it might be better for their life.
Sure.
And so we're having those discussions, but right now we're legally bound to transport that student from Tiverton, Rhode Island. And Rhode Island, for some reason, doesn't play nice in the sand, and they do not split the transportation cost.
No, they don't.
Rhode Island, for whatever reason, the communities around, and we did some research on this. To my knowledge, they're the only state, but for whatever reason, they say, we don't do that. And I don't know what the federal government's doing about that, but they're saying we don't, so we're paying the full cost to transport these students from Tiverton, Rhode Island.
Couple of highlights there, a super good question on that. We're working on a uniform replacement, so kind of similar to the curriculum revision, right? Like, try to be out ahead of these things, keep the uniforms that our students are wearing to represent your community out in other districts and other towns and cities, refreshed and looking their best. A couple of new things in 26. We've got girls lacrosse coming on, which we're really excited about, and again, some of those additional out-of-district homeless routes.
Do you try to get private businesses to pay for uniforms and stuff? Have you ever done that here in Carver?
We have not, to my knowledge, tried to have
No.
private businesses. If you've got some that want to work with us, have them give me a
Donate,
call.
donate, donations, that'd be great.
Well, I know a lot
Love
of, I know
donations.
some other, cities and towns do that, and, even like the bands, uniforms, with marching bands and stuff are usually, private, private companies will pay for some of it, PTOs will raise money for certain things. I wasn't sure if we would do that.
Our boosters are really supportive of
Yeah.
our athletics program, and they've helped us countless times with all sorts of things, including
Mhm.
from time to time the uniform. But if you know of a company, and that's sort of broadly, have them call me. We're always interested in working with the private sector to try to offset some of those costs, for sure.
And we still sell advertising on the fence.
Yeah, if anyone wants to buy
If you want to
advertising.
put advertising, absolutely. The 4,000 is predominantly your operations. A couple things to sort of flag for you. The electricity and gas costs have been down. This is a bit dated. I finished that about a month ago. Winter bills weren't finished quite yet. We are just going out to bid as a town for some of our utilities costs, and as I'm sure you've seen with the tariffs, those costs are increasing, and the sector in general is a little bit nervous. So we're expecting that the bids are going to come in higher than typical, because no company wants to bet on it going lower right now, right? So keep that in the back of your mind there. And then we have a painting program. It's a small program, but we pay students over the summer to help keep your schools clean and organized and well painted, fresh. We typically have only had that at the middle high school, but while we think about the elementary school as new, it's new to us, but it's a couple of years old now, and so we're expanding that
6 years
to-
old, which is kind of amazing. It's
to
6
include
years.
some painting and keep
Yeah.
that fresh so that we're keeping up with it. We're not chasing.
2018, over in 2018. So we're coming on 7 years old.
5,000 is pretty boring. It's your liability insurance and those sorts of things. We even still have a carryover insurance when Plymouth and Carver was regional and now is no longer, and some of those employees are.
It's still going on?
It's still going on.
Oh,
Still
boy.
going. I just got the letter the other day, actually.
I remember that.
Yeah, it's smaller each year.
By definition, it has
It's
to
gonna
be.
get
Yeah.
smaller each year.
Yeah.
I was retiring, we're not gonna talk why.
Yeah. And then so this is the one I think is your story for expenses. It was last year, it is going in this year. So we'll talk a little bit about it and then we'll do a deep dive for you. First, a little context of like what this includes. This 9,000 series includes any tuition that your school department or community is sending out, right? The large majority of your cost is special education out of district costs, but it also includes things like any vocational enrollment that's not Old Colony. So if there's a kiddo who wants to do a program that Old Colony doesn't have, they can still go do that program and we pay the cost for that program at a different vocational potentially. Right?
Well, most like the agricultural schools,
Hmm.
Norfolk Aggie, Bristol Aggie,
Hmm.
are the most
Yeah.
common. We send students to.
Dual enrollment, we don't have a ton of those, but that happens from time to time. And then we have a partnership with the READS program that essentially gives wraparound services for families in need. But that's, I would say, proportionally really small. The large majority of your costs there are going to be special education. But just to give you like context for what that looks like. So thinking about FY26, your vocational, like your non-OC costs are a little bit down this year. We had some graduations, which is great. Your out-of-district costs are still increasing, but the increase is slower. I'll dive into that in a little bit in just a moment. As I mentioned earlier, the state does set the costs for all of these. They do it school by school, and each school has to present to the state why my costs are going up. They try to regulate that. The state regulated right now the costs at about just shy of 4%. As you can see, our costs are about 7%. The out-of-district sped costs themselves are 8.5%. So we're still outpacing just a regular tuition increase, which we've got to sort of bring back, but better than we were in previous years. And I'll dive into that in a moment.
Does the vocational, at the top, the vocational school, does that include like a charter school?
It does not.
No.
Okay.
That's a
Yeah,
separate
that's
The
assessment.
Aggies are really the good example there for
Okay.
us.
What is a dual enrollment?
Sometimes high school students can also enroll in a community college at the same time and get double credits.
And who pays, you're saying we pay for that?
We're paying for a small amount, I think it's $1,500. I think we save, so it's 10 students, and we'll give them a credit of $150. So that may not actually pay the whole cost of the course, depending where it is. could be Bridgewater State, so.
Mass
it's
Maritime
yeah,
does it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because I think our kids did Mass Maritime.
Yeah, and in some cases, they'll take the high school credit at college for a course that we don't offer.
Sure,
Right.
gotcha.
So when you talk about, the kids going into other, say, vocational programs, like the Aggie schools and so forth, and I'm getting to transportation, part of that. So if they're gonna go to like Norfolk or Bristol Aggie, and they get in there, so Carver's gonna provide the transportation for
We-
that?
We provide transportation, but I will say, one of the things we do a nice job at is we actually work with all the districts around us.
Right, yeah.
Silver Lake,
Used to do-
Yeah,
Middleborough,
it's all
so we all
it's
pitch
all
into
shared.
it to have a bus, bring the kiddos to one bus, and then the Aggie kiddos for Norfolk, from 3 different towns, will go on a single bus
Yep.
to there.
Okay,
Add, rinse, repeat.
so that still happens, okay,
Yeah,
good.
it's a nice thing, again, kudos to sort of everyone around us for starting that. It's been there probably since your time, I imagine, like,
Oh, yep,
to
yep.
develop that, and that's been
No, I remember
cost
doing,
saver across
I
the
remember
board.
doing that, just asking if that's still the way it was.
Yep, for
Yeah,
sure, for
okay.
sure. So let's drill down to this 9,000 series. I think that's the most relevant for your expenses in terms of the story here. Okay, let me start with like a little bit of context for your out-of-district costs in general. What you're looking at on the right is 23 actuals, 24 actuals, and 25, 26, obviously budgets. You see here this sharp increase in those out-of-district costs. As I talked about earlier, that was a combination of number of students who need those services increasing and increasing tuition costs at the individual locations. So a function of both increased enrollment and increased tuition. This was the question that someone had asked about, like, hey, how much do these things cost? Do you have some examples? Are you, Tony? So here's a couple of examples. I'm intentionally not showing you any one because we're a small community. I just like to be sensitive to the kiddos and their families as well. This is a public presentation. But this is a good set of examples of the kinds of schools that we have used over the past several years to meet the service needs of kiddos. What you see in the colors is FY 21, 22, 23. Those are all actuals. That's the latest data that we have. And then this is your individual schools, right? So things like your Perkins School for the Blind, it's pretty self-explanatory. Millmark and May have specific services that they provide. And on your left, you can see the price tag on these. These are just day schools. So this is a situation, for example, just use Perkins as the most extreme. FY 24, the tuition for one student to attend Perkins for the year was $200,000. That does not include the cost to transport that kiddo to and from Perkins each year. As Mr. Neef alluded to, you've seen a pretty massive spike in those actual tuitions, which you can see right here from 23 to 24 in any of the schools. Again, the state regulates that, and it all happened at once. Probably not the best planning from our friends over in Beacon Hill. All in, you're looking at the better part of a 20% increase just over the past couple of years. That's a real challenge. I didn't include the residentials. I had a graphic in my previous presentations with the residentials. They're just about double. And so if you had to live at the school, then you're in the better part of 400 grand for one kid. Yeah. It does save on transportation, but it's not financially, it's not a winner for you. This is a complicated graph, I know, but I actually really like it, mostly because I'm a nerd for this stuff, but bear with me. So what you're looking at here on the left is your actual change in expenses, not your total expenses, just the difference in any given year. Every bar that's in blue represents the year that you had in Carver and then the change you saw in the cost for special education programming. In orange, it's the percent change, right? So change over time, percent change. What's important to take a look at here is you only have had 2 points in time where you actually had a negative change. FY21, which is COVID, obviously. But this one here is the one that I think is instructive from like a financial data analysis perspective. In FY 2017, Carver built some new in-house special education programs which actually brought students back from out-of-district placements. And again, as we talked about in transportation, if you can do it locally without having some kind of increase for the vendor, it usually saves the taxpayer money, and more often than not, gives you better control over the program, right? Why am I sharing all this bit with you here? As you can see, going from 24's actuals to 25 now, and then 26 budget, yes, you are seeing an increase still, but you're seeing a lower rate of change, which is in the right direction. Will you be at 17? Probably not. But this is the right direction, and the goal would be in 27 that we continue, right? That we still have some increase, there's gonna be some increase in tuition, obviously. We may still have additional students who need that service, certainly, but the goal would be to be somewhere down here, continuing to like decrease the overall increase. Does that make sense? Lastly, here's your expense analysis, big picture, kind of going back up here to the 10,000-foot view. The better part of nearly 90% of your total operating programming costs are direct student services. The remainder are things like operations, some admin, related benefits like our Plymouth Carver insurance, like those sorts of things. Again, notable this year is that percentage that you have this green here, that is tuitions at that 9,000 series. Pre-pandemic, it was 8%. We're hovering at 11. Goal should be to try to get that back to 10 over the next year or so. Eventually, you'd like to try to see somewhere back at 8. That's expenses. Let me give you an executive summary all in and then field any questions you might have. All in operating expense, 27.7 and some change. Your revenue, identical. That gives you a net zero budget. Again, it does require the better part of 100,000 one-time revenues. The goal going forward, we've got to get that down to 0. Our school committee was supportive of our overall budget, voted your figure for the warrant. Certainly April town meeting is coming up, and then assuming we are able to get an approval for the budget, start at FY26 in July. I know this went very long, but I hope it was helpful to give you some context for your school department, and I'll answer any questions.
That was great. That was very informative. Very informative. I'm glad we did that.
I
Very
might have
good.
missed it at the beginning, but what was the cost per pupil?
Didn't put up the cost per pupil because it's in arrears. So your cost per pupil is calculated by DESI 2 years in arrears. So I can pull you the FY24 number, it's just not super relevant. I'll get it for you, but I just don't have it off the top of my head.
I thought we used to get it, that's all.
I can send it to you. It doesn't, yeah, in terms of like your planning process or like decision-making over it, it's like an autopsy number, right? Like, this is what it used to be 2 years ago, and then it continues to
Well,
trend.
if you took your budget and divided by how
Yeah,
many
by the
students there are, you
students.
get the number. I
Yeah,
mean, ultimately, your overall budget.
That's not the cost of one
No,
student coming in.
No, it's just like average.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the budget reflects per student.
But doesn't,
I'll pull it for
Doesn't
you.
matter how many students
Yeah,
there are
just-
in some situations, but,
DOE calculates that, right?
yeah.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get it for you, I
So
just don't have it
to
on top of
keep
my
it
head.
To keep it
That's good.
consistent with other communities,
Right.
you gotta get it from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Other questions that I can help answer for you?
Quick
John?
question,
Yeah,
what is,
back.
is there an outside third-party ranking system? I used to use the DART, District Analysis Research, but that data is all old. That states where does Carver stand overall in the state compared to other schools?
It is that
Second
data.
grade English, fifth grade math,
It's-
eighth grade science.
It is
Still
that data.
done. Still done.
It is always old. To your point about the per pupil, it all comes from the same thing. So every year, I do an audit with the state, that information gets compiled with all the other districts, and they generate the per pupil for you and the DART for you. But it is 2 years in arrears.
If you go, I mean, we can give you data, but if this, all this information is publicly available,
Yes.
just go to this, sir, you can go to Google and go, school and community, DESI, school and community profiles.
It's all
And you
there.
pick on Carver and you can find any
Hours.
number you
Everything,
want.
yeah.
It's all publicly available data, but it is behind. It's not this budget's data,
Right.
obviously. But it's all out there.
100%.
I mean, it's more curiosity than anything else. So I think I've seen nationally where schools have been struggling, probably ever since COVID. You know, kids kind of struggle coming in and out of COVID. Do you still think it's relevant to Carver too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it
You know,
is.
so we're seeing an increase in social emotional needs. Kids are exhibiting more self-regulation issues. So it's not, and obviously there's academic concerns as well. You know, so we're not back to where we were pre-COVID in terms of, you know, straight standardized test scores. Though, interestingly enough, and I don't know if, the SAT data is pretty consistent to what it used to be, so that's come back. Our AP scores have really bounced back in the last year or two, MCAS is not. It's improving, because we really we bottomed out, and so did the state. And now it's coming back up, but it's not close to where it was in pre-pandemic for MCAS scores for anybody. And we did a lot of analysis with the school committee in terms of that, in terms of our dip was a little harder and our comeback is a little shallower. So we have some places to go in terms of MCAS scores, but just really that data. But I think the biggest issue we're seeing is it's still that social emotional piece. But now the positive side of that is I think every year has been better. This year has certainly been more normal than last year. And last year was more normal than the year before. Normal if I'm comparing to pre-COVID. I think every grade level suffered in different ways in COVID. I think our current 4th and 5th graders who were in kindergarten and 1st grade, I think they got hit in some ways the hardest, because they were just, makes, if you really think back, it makes sense. Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, you're learning to read, you're learning your basic fundamentals, and that was deprived, they lost part of that. And so I think that's a harder piece to come back from. But I think we're moving in the right direction. It's gonna, I don't know how long it's gonna take to have it come back to where it was. But yeah, you still see those impacts there.
Yeah. Yeah, I still remember Charlie Baker saying you really can't learn how to read when you're wearing a mask, for those kids who were in the...
Wearing a mask
grades,
or and virtually. Yeah.
That was tough.
Very difficult.
It was tough, yeah. I had a middle schooler who was trying to learn algebra, and that was a tough day, yeah.
Question, does elimination of MCAS have any effect on how you educate kids going forward?
It's not eliminated.
No, so they haven't eliminated the MCAS exam. It's just eliminated as the graduation requirement for seniors. We're still required to give the exam in English and math to all students in grades 3 through 8 and 10th grade, and science in grades 5, 8, and 1 high school grade. That's actually, it's tied to a federal requirement for federal funding. So some people have asked the question of, well, if all the federal funding gets pulled away, will that requirement go away? So to receive federal funding, you're required to test students in some way. You're supposed to have a standardized measure in grades 3 through 8 and in grade 10. So MCAS is the state's measure. They're still required to give that exam to receive federal funding. It just doesn't count, as students don't have to pass it in 10th grade to graduate. But we're still going to start next week. We'll still be giving all the MCAS exams and using that as a measurement. And the MCAS exams are, they are a reflection of your implementation of the state's curriculum frameworks.
Any other questions we help?
Anything from anybody else? Okay.
Well,
Thanks very much again, guys. Appreciate it. And
Thank you.
again,
Appreciate
it was very informative, and I think it's always good to know what our friends at the school department are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Beth, I'll send you that per pupil tomorrow, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Moving right along. We've got, going to go over the warrant, but before we do that, Beth, do we have to do anything about voting for your capital, or?
So I don't believe we have to revote. We just had a capital meeting right before this, that's why I was late. So what we did in the meeting was, we still approved the $1.3 million, so that number has not changed. We have not changed the split between the town or the school. What we did is we took $20,000 off of, I think it was called the playground.
Resurfacing?
Resurfacing, I believe that was the name of that project. And we moved that over to the berm. And then we took another $10,000 off that same project and moved it up to the library's fixtures that they need.
Okay, so you'll be, when we get to that part, when we get to that article in the warrant, you'll be able to tell us that.
Yes,
Okay, good.
yeah, that's the only
That's all I
change we
wanted
did.
to know.
We moved those items.
Okay, good. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go over the warrant and do any necessary votes that are asked of the Finance Committee. I'd like to do, we've got the latest and greatest from updated today, really. the town meeting warrant. And I've gone through it and marked up where I think we need to vote. If I missed one or whatever, we can do that. But what I'd like to do is we go through this, and then as we get to each article, we'll take a motion to approve the article and second it, and then in our discussion part of it, that's where our discussion will be. Okay? So I think the first one that we've got is gonna be Article 2, and it's gonna be budget transfers.
Can I just ask one thing
Go
on
ahead.
this article before we put a vote up?
Yeah,
Some years we have voted each one individually, sometimes we vote in total. Do we have a feeling of which way we want to do it this year?
well,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I'm saying goodbye to John, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's
Didn't
okay.
mean to interrupt.
okay, John.
So there have been some years where we just vote the total for the budget transfers, from the free cash. And then other years we have said, let's vote each article individually, where we've said A, B, C, D.
Yeah, I was gonna say, aren't they usually have a letter next to them when we voted them?
Yeah, if we choose to do it that way, then we put a letter and we vote. I'm just wondering
Well,
how.
yeah,
So
like
I
in
guess,
this-
does anyone want to vote
Yeah.
on a particular line?
I think on, at least, well, we can, yeah, you can ask
Well-
that. I mean, for me, I'm voting on this whole thing,
Well,
but,
we can do that. I mean, we'll take a motion and to approve, a motion and a second, and then we can get into, okay, in our discussion.
so I'll make a motion to approve Article 2 as it's written in its entirety.
Okay, so we get a
Second.
motion from Tony and a second from Beth. Okay, any discussion? Anybody want to talk to a particular one of these line items? The motion is to vote it in its entirety.
So the only question I have is the North Carver Water District water subsidy.
Yep.
Regardless of what happens in that other warrant, will that money still go to whoever is managing that, correct?
Correct, so,
Okay.
so the article to dissolve the North Carver Water District really dissolves the management.
I got you.
So if it essentially becomes a town department, we still have to have a budget to run
Sure.
that department, so.
But is that for the budget or is that for the debt?
The debt, yeah.
Well, it's for their budget, their debt is $231,000, I mean, it essentially does pay off the debt, that's what it comes down to. But it just goes into their budget.
Or in the past, haven't we voted specifically to pay that debt?
Yeah, we used to call it the debt. That's,
I mean, you're offsetting it, I believe
Okay,
last year we
okay.
voted
Yeah,
168,000, this year it's 200.
It all depends. I mean, we've got, we can do it.
it's up to you guys. I just wanted to put it out there before
Right.
we made
Yeah.
a
No,
motion.
I wanted to make clear,
That's
because he
Because-
mentioned a budget, so.
Because we're gonna be talking about their budget too, and we're also gonna be talking about in another article, is their existence,
Yes.
okay? So we got a motion and a second, and there didn't seem to be any particular.
I
Go
just
ahead,
want to be
Bill.
clear, so the capital debt stabilization fund, that's what we're putting away for the ladder truck?
Correct.
And if that passes, presumably.
If that,
And
I
if-
mean,
If it doesn't, then that is gonna stay there for some other
some of the
future
use,
capital,
correct.
okay. I don't have any other questions.
Okay, everybody good?
Yes.
Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? No, okay, 5-0. Unanimous. Okay, next article will be Article number 3, operating budget for the town, of which is the total budget of $52,283,431. And that would be some proposed motions, the information summary and so forth. And it gives a lot of the information in how that number's come up with and so forth. So if, go ahead.
If they're highlighted yellow, have they had a change?
They still need to be confirmed by the finance director is what it comes down to. So last night, there were some changes to this article from the select board. The finance director was not available today to confirm those numbers. The overall number doesn't change, the $12,823,000 13. It's the breakdown, so we'll just, last night what we did, we broke the fixed liabilities out of the town budget. It was in the town budget, so they asked us to break those out, which I think you've seen in prior years.
Yeah.
How we specifically go about that, I need a little bit of help from the finance director.
Okay, so do you think these yellow line items will change?
They could change, they won't change substantially, they will not change substantially.
But the bottom line stays the same.
Bottom line stays the same.
Just not an exact figure.
Right now, right, there could
Right.
be some fluctuation there.
For the line items.
Yeah.
But the
Oh,
bottom
okay.
line is gonna stay. So,
Yep.
okay, so, well, let's get a motion first, and then we can get to more discussion. So I could have
I'll make a motion, approve Article 3 as written, with a total town budget of $12,823 and $823,013.
Do we have to vote for,
So, do you wanna do the
And
whole?
then, yeah, and then a total general budget fund of $52,283,431.
Okay, so we got a motion, we got a second?
second?
Okay, motion by Tony, second by Beth. Okay, now we'll open it up for some more discussion if we need to.
See the split, okay, 68-4.
So just,
I will say one thing, I think you see a little bit different this year, and we work on this a little bit. In the informational summary, the very first sentence, we took those fixed liabilities, those are the old shared costs, we renamed them over this past summer
yeah,
during our committee meeting. And we just kind of did a general split of 75% to the school and 25% to the town. Kind of gives you an overall feel of what it costs to run the school and then what it costs to run the town. I know I had a discussion today with the superintendent of schools. He told me, he doesn't endorse that number specifically. It's a little, probably too little too detailed for him, but you're somewhere in the $35 million range, and for the town, you're at somewhere in the $16 million range.
does he think it's more like a 70-30?
I didn't get into it too much with him, but
Okay,
he,
So you're saying the actual, the fixed liabilities broken down and added to the individual?
correct. The fixed liabilities, health insurance, retirement, and there's just more school
There's a lot
employees in
of
our town.
employees over there.
Yeah, right, that's all, there's just more,
okay.
things of that nature. So that's just a little further breakdown.
Okay, any other questions or concerns about anything in this article? No? Okay. So ready for a vote? We get a motion in a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstaining? Okay. 5-0 unanimous. Okay, here's one of our favorites, North Carver Water District. We have Article 4, North Carver Water District, for a total budget of $650,000.
Okay.
Could I give you a little bit with this, Pal?
Okay.
Because there's
Let's get a motion
Oh, sorry.
first, please. We can have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion
Article
approved
4.
by Beth and a second by Walter. Okay, now we're into discussion.
Sure, just so this budget here was one recommended by myself and the finance director for the North Carver Water District, primarily based on the amount of fees that they're bringing in. We didn't feel like we should be subsidizing them to the extent that they're really looking for. They did vote a budget of $781,000. On a 2-1 vote, the chairman did not vote for it. What that is, that's an increase of $131,000 over what you see here. My plan would be to dissolve the North Carver Water District. That $131,000 will be made up by town forces. If you're not aware of it, this year, Mr. Belvin took over as chair, really tried to break out the North Carver Water District as a true district. That's how it's voted, that's how the law reads, they're a separate entity from the town. I think we are seeing the financial implications of that are significant on the town. There were higher budget projections brought forward by the North Carver Water District that didn't move forward. Again, the primary reason why we want to take this over is we actually want to take over the finances. I want to get a true cost of what it brings to take that plant back up and running. We don't know what that answer is. You know, we've been waiting, what, we've gone 10 months now, we still don't have that answer. So again, this is a budget brought forward by me, endorsed by the finance director for the town. And if it is dissolved, we will bring in more, you know, we're bringing in more town forces. You know, and I mean, some of the stuff is janitorial services, it's an electrician, you know. There are things out there that just haven't been maintained for years. So instead of hiring consultants, we're just gonna use town forces, what it comes down to. With that said, we still need to hire you know, we don't have a professional engineer on staff. We'll have to hire a professional engineer to go through the whole plant and give me a detailed breakdown of what it costs to bring that plant up to speed. To me, that process needs to go through the capital committee. It really shouldn't be in their budget. You know, if you're talking about new membranes, new pumps, you know, those aren't budgeted items every school year. You know, the budget is for those things that, you know, when you're replacing parts and those things, not to replace the entire structure. The condition of the facility right now is such that major components need to be replaced, if we're gonna bring it back up to speed. Now, again, I don't even know that answer right now.
Well, that was my question. Is there a plan B, like to not use that facility and use what we're doing right now with Middleborough?
Well, my number one goal would be to bring it back up to speed, right? You know, I want
Yeah,
to be in
sure.
control of our own destiny if we can be.
Of course.
I'll tell you now, if we get an engineer comes in there and they say, you know, it's a $5 million number, you'll see me run into Middleborough. I'll tell you right now. And we'll still be continuing to be in Middleborough, even if it's a reasonable number. I mean, it's gonna take us a year to get that plant back up and running. I mean, it hasn't been operational. And, you know, I know Mr. Bowman, I don't really think he's addressed yet. There's all kinds of concerns out there. I've heard concerns about the wells themselves. So, you know, there could be a lot of work out there. And we have to be ready for that. So, you know, continue to have that relationship with Middleborough is key to me.
We had the North Carver Water District in to address the Finance Committee a few weeks ago, and they just could not come up with either a plan or a number. And, you know, they're talking, you know, they were talking in the range of $1.5 million, and then plus all this other stuff that needs to be done.
But they were just pulling figures out. There was
Yeah,
no
and
concrete.
there was no continuity to that.
Yeah.
There was no, you know, no engineering study there, you know, in this stuff, and it just that, okay.
Well, the concerning part is two things. One is if we got it up and running, there's nothing there that's gonna pay for itself, because we don't have enough users for it. Until if we built something up in North Carver with industry and they were gonna pay, right?
Correct.
But even if we get it up and running, who's paying for it? Who's paying for the forward costs on it? We don't have enough homes that are using it to pay. Their meter bill would be huge if you had to offset the cost, right?
Yeah, it's one of the things you can do. You know, you can have a rate study done to find out what the true cost to run that plant is, and what that true cost would be onto the ratepayers.
I mean, if I'm paying right now $50 a month for water, and then you come and tell me, well, it's gonna be $1,000 a month for water, well, how am I gonna do that, right?
Right. I mean, and right now, like I say, you tell me about the history. We're subsidizing it every single year. You know, you really shouldn't be doing that. You know, it's one thing if you have a bad year, right? An enterprise fund is supposed to run itself. You know, if you have a bad year, the town kicks in some money. That's one thing. If they come to capital and say they need a pump, that's another thing.
But how?
Every single
right,
year,
how is it gonna be subsidized going forward, even if we get it up and running? Even if we took the cost of it, the town, all right, we'll repair it once it's operational. The water how are we gonna charge to make it pay for itself? It seems like there's not enough people drawing from it.
We're still gonna be subsidizing it for the next,
What's that?
we're still gonna be subsidizing
Yeah,
it for the
but
next
that's
15
what I'm
years,
saying,
no
does it
matter
make
what
sense?
happens.
So if we're subsidizing $1 million a year, or whatever it is it better to take the water to pay what we're using through Middleborough? Until you get industry in here that may offset enough usage to pay for
Right.
it.
I mean, I think one of the things a rate study would do, right? You know, you have two different scenarios. One would staying with Middleborough, right? I mean, that's really a more solid cost, if you will, right? You know, I know they've had some rate increases, but it's fairly standard. You know, you can call Middleborough, ask what the rate is, figure that out. And then the other side of it being, you know, how much money you're going to put into it, they gonna recoup those costs? You know, I mean, are we actually talking about borrowing money? Again, you know, these are things that we have to be able to answer.
So just, we're kind of getting into the other
Yeah, I
article
know.
with this
Yes,
conversation.
yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Sorry,
is it-
yeah, you're right.
when we talked to them, I had mentioned, like as you just said, like the membrane should be a capital item. And I think Pat had a concern about how capital relates with an enterprise fund. Do you know, can an enterprise fund come to our town capital?
As far as I know, they can.
Okay.
I know they can come to the reserve fund and ask for funding if they run short. But again, you know, the primary thing of an enterprise fund is it runs itself.
Understood.
I can tell you, the EMS services are not an enterprise fund, right? I can't, what they call it.
Yeah.
Fixed appropriation has a different
Yeah.
name to it,
Yeah.
but it runs just like an enterprise
So
fund.
it should be.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, they bring in revenue from every ambulance run that offsets all their costs. You know, and they're even buying a new ambulance this year with their own money. And I mean, that's how an enterprise fund should run. You know,
That's what I'm saying, so if I'm a user of that well, or that, how much do I have to pay so it runs as an enterprise fund? Is it 1,000 a month, is it 500 a month?
yeah, and again, you'd have to do a rate study
Yeah.
for that. And, you know, I don't think we have a split rate here, right? Even though I think there is a higher charge for higher users. So, you know, you might do a split rate between commercial and residential, right? And generally that's to ease up a little bit on the residential and a little bit more on the commercial.
But I think too, is that, like Bill said, we're getting out of, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So this budget is the budget either way.
This is the budget we're
It's gotta
recommending.
be. Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
can I,
They've gotta have a budget,
all right,
yes.
just
Go
one
ahead.
thing, so you said they wanted 781,000, we're gonna give them 650, are they aware of that?
Oh, they are aware.
Okay, and they're okay, because you said it was a 2-to-1
It
vote.
was a 2-to-1 vote. Again, the chairman is advocating for more, like I say, he came in front of this committee,
Okay,
I can't remember, was it $1.3 million he was looking
1.4
for?
million or
So
something.
without a
like
real,
that,
all the members are aware of
Okay.
this budget.
just wanna make sure
Yeah.
they're aware.
Yeah.
Okay.
And two is just, again, how likely are they to stay within their budget this year?
It is very tight right now.
Yeah,
We've warned them a couple times
yeah.
already.
So, you know, and, well, I got some comments for the other part of this, so, in any case,
So we're gonna vote on this budget?
any more discussion on the $650,000 budget?
Nope.
Okay, good. Then we've got a motion and we've got a second, so all those in favor of the $650,000 budget, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstain? Very good, thank you. Again, another 5-0 unanimous vote. Next one would be the capital improvement budget. And that's gonna be the $1.3 million. And Beth, if you've got any,
Yeah,
you wanna talk about some changes in the line items?
yeah, so this looks like it's been updated.
It has been.
Oh, it has been
Yeah.
updated?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, so the ones that were changed were in line 11, the middle high school library updates, that's been put back to 120,000. The Carver Elementary School berm, which is in line 12, is
Yep.
20,000. That was the one we had taken out
Yep.
last time. And then they reduced line 13, install artificial play surfaces at the
Okay.
elementary school, to
Mhm.
25,000.
Okay,
That was 55. So it still balances in total, and the amount the town's getting has not changed, the amount the school's getting has not changed. It's just that those three
okay.
projects have been
Can I ask a
reallocated.
question? What is the berm? What is the project?
So the berm is behind the playground at the elementary school. In the back of the school, I hope I'm gonna describe this right, but in the back of the school, there's like a playground. And then the ground kind of goes up like this in the back of it, and it keeps wearing away.
Oh, okay.
And they need to replace that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I can just remember the pictures, and I think it's mostly the kids running up and down.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
just
yeah.
can't grow grass on it.
So what are they gonna do? Put a retaining wall, or are they gonna try to
They're gonna
smooth
take
it
the
out?
berm out.
They're
I
gonna
think
just,
they're taking the berm out.
Yeah, and I think they're gonna grade
And
it.
part of it is like they climb up it and then they slide down
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff, and
yeah.
that rips all the grass up, and then they're muddy and they go back into school. And
You
Yeah.
can't keep wood chips there because they fall
Yeah.
down. And
okay.
Okay,
so they
so,
said that was important to them to replace.
okay, so, in any case, I think we've already voted this at a joint meeting, as we've got our votes down under proposed motion 1 and proposed motion 2.
Yes.
And those numbers have not changed.
Because when we made this vote at the joint meeting, we voted for the totals, not the
Right.
individual projects.
So is everybody okay with that one?
Mhm.
Okay, so we don't need to, no vote necessary. Okay, next one is gonna be transfer to the middle high school building stabilization fund.
Make a motion to approve, as written.
Second?
Okay, do you wanna put a number with that, or?
There is a
Total.
total, yeah.
Yeah, so for the total appropriation of $1,038,926.60.
Okay. Actually,
Is that the number you wanted me to vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I gotta go back and say, that was the motion. Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion by Beth, second by Tony. Any further or other discussion or comment on Article 6? Bill?
So there's three sources of revenue, or of cash coming in. The middle high school construction reserve budget,
Is that existing, or is that?
Yeah,
what is
That's
that?
existing, right?
I believe that is from a 2023 town meeting article.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not really sure that account actually exists.
The 225, 310?
Yeah, the 225, 310, which is why we're recommending that it come, so it was put into, it's sitting in the general fund
Yeah.
as a budget line item. It's been sitting there where it really should be sitting in the middle high school building stabilization fund. So,
Okay.
yeah, an inadvertent transfer, if you will.
So this goes back to when a lot of us thought we were putting away pilot money for what, third.
Yeah.
Only one of those was
Oh, okay.
actually voted correctly at a town meeting, and I believe this is the one.
That was the one.
So we're gonna be putting just over $1 million into this stabilization fund.
It needs to be
It already
caught.
exists, is there money in there already?
No, there is no money
So
in
we're
there.
creating it at this point.
It has already been created, there is no funding in it.
Okay.
Sorry, so, and the intent was to put funding in it every single year.
Right.
It didn't happen.
From one-time monies, I think.
Yeah, so this
was
is
the
to
idea
correct
of pilot.
So that's the 225, 310 comes from 2023. The $715,755.60
Some solar.
comes from the solar money, which is supposed to be transferred every single year, coming from a 2020 article.
Right.
But unfortunately, it didn't happen. So that, again, we're correcting that. And then if you see the 97,861, and you saw it in the presentation tonight, I know we're kind of fast tonight. The select board voted to take all the solar pilot money starting in July 1st, 2024, and put it into these capital stabilization funds.
Yep.
And so that's part of that. And if the school were here, so the intent, the original intent that I'm aware of is the middle high school building stabilization fund was really to kind of offset the cost of the school. And, you know, it's probably a good idea. If we can build up some money, that would be fine, but, you know, the schools now are
We're not
incredible.
gonna save
Right,
$100 million to build a new school.
correct, it's unbelievable.
It'll take 100 years.
Right,
I think part of it is for the feasibility study that we're trying to do.
correct, and if you saw, Old Colony recently just did a feasibility study for $1.2 million to do a feasibility study. So when we talked to the school over the summertime, they were thinking because it's a few years away, I can't remember, was it 5 to 10 years away before we even start planning this thing
New
out?
high school?
Yeah.
Oh, at least 10, I think.
And longer than, okay.
Yeah.
Well, they were thinking if we had $1.5 million in this fund for the feasibility study.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a reasonable offset. For us to pay cash for the feasibility, you know, we
Yeah.
don't be borrowing money for
'Cause
feasibility.
we typically operate under the assumption that we're gonna put a whole nother generation through these schools.
Yeah.
So that's how we make our decisions, you know, you're not gonna redo the library if we're gonna have a new school in 5 years, you know?
Yeah. So, again, so we visited this year, in the summertime. Pat and Beth both sat on a committee we have to go over the financial policy with the select board. When we revisit again this summer, We might talk about, in a couple of years, I wish their breakdown was here, the 715. Some years are better than others. We're probably putting about $150,000 a year into this account, so I don't know what, 3 or 4 years, we could be talking about capping this.
Right.
And just saying, we got $1.5 million, let's just leave it in there, wait for the feasibility to just to come about again. If you, at the select board meeting last night, town council was talking about, you could always change the purpose of it. I know the school track is on the capital plan to be replaced one of these years.
Yeah, the field.
The fields, if you want to expand this a little bit to just be a school stabilization fund, might be able to pay for the track. So, again, we have some decisions to make in a few years.
Is that 715 kind of catching up?
Yeah, that's catching up.
Okay.
That's from, 2020, it was voted, so fiscal year 2021, so 21, 22, 23, 24.
Okay, so moving forward, it'll be a more modest number going.
It'll be a more modest number, correct. Like I say, probably about $150,000 a year. Somewhere in that range.
Okay, that's good. Any other discussion? Okay, so we're ready for a vote. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? 5-0 unanimously, thank you. And now we'll go to Article 7, rescinding an authorized yet unissued borrowing appropriation.
I move that we approve Article 7 as written in the warrant.
Second?
Okay, so we've got a motion by Bill, a second by Beth. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? We go, 5-0.
Can I just give one thing, because I want to give her props.
Yeah.
This is 100% your finance director and her diligent work to find these two from 2015. I can tell you right now,
Sure.
she's digging and digging and digging, and working hard to find this money. So I appreciate that a lot.
There's a lot of articles to read.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like she's digging right through them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she's doing a great job.
She sure is, boy. She finds her that money.
No vote for the Finance Committee on Article 8. Article 9, Community Preservation Committee report and recommendations, which is quite a few things here. And how would anybody like to go about
Yeah.
doing this one? We could do it in total, or,
I'm okay with voting in total for this.
okay, so go ahead, Beth, if you want to make a motion.
Is that everybody else okay?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to move Article 9 as written.
Okay, we got a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Beth, second by Tony. Any discussion on this or any of the components of the article?
So the track debt service, is that in anticipation of the expense, or is that something else?
Existing, right?
This is the previous track that was borrowed
Oh, okay,
for the
so
track.
that's-
Yeah.
And
The new field and everything.
Yeah,
That would be-
and I would say unfortunately, I believe it only has about a 10-year life, so I think by the time we're done paying off this borrowing, we'll be looking to
Yeah.
replace that track.
The turf's still in really good shape, though,
Yeah.
even after the Super Bowl runs.
Okay, Glenn, did you want to, you look like you wanted to say something.
No,
Okay,
I just don't really have a lot to share with this one, that's all.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
that's fine.
Should have more detail for you.
Anything else?
Just, what is the Atlantic River Corridor Conservation Project?
Yeah, I know that's a bigger project that we're partnering with the Buzzards Bay Coalition. I want to see if I get some of the details here.
Pot B, I think.
And it looks like it's mislabeled, actually.
Yeah, because I'm
It
looking at
is, it should be
C.
part, the description is part B.
Oh, okay.
Oh, jeez.
Should, yeah.
Hmm.
I will
it should be-
correct that. So it's the Buzzards Bay Coalition looking to purchase a large tract of land, 515 acres in South Carver. as part of, is it the Newcomb Bogs? Oh my gosh, I mean, the man's name escaped me right now, I can still see his face. So anyways, the Buzz Bay Coalition, partnering with the town of Carver, and the town of Wareham, I believe, to purchase this large tract of land to put it into conservation, so.
Any further discussion? Comment? No?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I
So,
guess not.
got a motion and a second, and all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? None? Okay, 5-0 unanimously. Article 10 is not anything of the, needs a finance committee vote. And, no, yeah,
Nope,
did I miss it?
that's
Okay.
11.
And now we're on to Article 11, which I'm sure we're gonna discuss a little bit. Home rule petition to dissolve the North Carver Water District. So let's start off and see, do we have a motion to approve it?
I'll make a motion to approve Article
Okay.
11, the home rule petition to dissolve the North Carver Water District.
Second.
Okay, so a motion by Tony, second by Beth. Okay, now we'll open up the discussion. Okay, who wants to start?
What, is there a way, and I know that the current personalities may prevent this, but can we have a commission or have this thing in control of the town, but have a community representative board that's making sure that we don't end up in the situation we were in last year when Bob went in there and dramatically produced all these photos of the conditions and everything? Like, is there a way to kind of meld the two things instead of
Well-
just dissolving?
Well, if you do dissolve the North Carver Water District, it will make the select board the water commissioners of the town. So if there were citizen complaints, they'd be able to go to the select board who would, come to me and make sure they're addressed. One thing that did happen, I was told, there was an employee hired in the operation and maintenance department who was at least a liaison between the residents and town hall, because before, there was a real disconnect. If you had a complaint, there was kind of nobody to complain about, or complain to, I should say. I think that becoming a town department helps that also. One thing like right now, if you go to the North Carver Water District office, right, where are you going? They don't have an office. There is no secretary. You know what I mean? If it becomes a town department, there's somebody you can walk into, you can be face to face, you can sit down, you can make an appointment if you need a long discussion. You can just walk in and ask questions, all those kinds of things that you want to be able to help residents, who to call after hours, all those kinds of things, So I think all that improves, again, if it becomes a town department.
And I think a big part of this is and this is what I've been saying for quite some time, is it's not an effective organizational structure
Right.
to have it running the way it is. We're looking at, a $650,000 budget, yet we've also heard numbers up to $1.5 million. We had the North Carver Water District into our meeting, and I can remember unsolicited, the person presenting to us says, I know nothing about water and I know nothing about budgets or finances. Scary situation to have that. I look at this as similar to, or the organizational structure should be similar to some that we've got in town with similar budgets. And if we're gonna look at, $1 million plus here or whatever, we've got operations and maintenance, we have the fire department, and we have the ambulance service. Those three have some commonalities to them. They have knowledgeable professionals as either chief or director. They know, they're experts, they know those departments inside and out. They also know how to build and maintain budgets. And that's the type of organizational structure that we need in the North Carver Water District. They are also responsible to town administrator and the select board. And to have I'm not criticizing the people on the North Carver Water District, but to have a group of non-experts making decisions, and some of those are gonna be six-figure decisions, I don't think is the right place to be. So that's just a couple of my thoughts.
Just, I just have one question.
I have no thing.
Just one. So I just want to make sure, is the town prepared on their side of the budget, if this is dissolved, do we need to hire somebody as a liaison now? Are we gonna be able to function with the staff we have today and still be able to help out the North Carver Water District?
Yes.
Okay.
So the director of O&M, he is a water operator, he has his license, right?
Okay,
But he won't be doing the work. He would still be hiring consultants, but I think to Pat's point, the difference between he and a person who's just elected coming in off the street, Dave has the expertise. He has years and years and years of expertise saying, this is where you need to spend your money. This is what you need to do today. This can
But
wait till tomorrow,
do we have those consultants in the budget?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
All right, that's all.
At least
Wanna
to
make
start off
sure.
with, and again, and to offset what they're paying for now with staff,
Okay,
And then, again, this one gentleman was hired to at least be a liaison. I don't even think you have to do that, again, O&M, you walk in there as a secretary, she's, works 40 hours a week. She's there, when the town hall's open, you can walk in and
Can
talk
I ask
to
a
her.
question that might be, been asked before, but we have a budget, or we've had a budget for this department, but they're not generating water. What are we doing with that money?
So they are somewhat trying to get the plant up, I don't want to use the word up and running, back to a level where it can be operational, right? They're spending some money on that.
But I mean, think of this, last year we gave, how much money did we give?
It was in this same range. I want to say maybe 131,000.
And then on top of that, we're paying Middleborough, who's pumping the water to us, right? So
Correct.
that's what I'm saying, we have a budget, like this going forward, if we're gonna approve this budget, we're still paying for no water. We're still paying
Correct.
but I know, I get it, we're trying to move in that direction so that we can get, so when this plan is up and running, the hopes is that we won't have to pay Middleborough anymore for water because we'll be generating our own water.
Well, in the immediate future, you'll still be paying Middleborough for water, because we still have.
Sure,
to-
right,
Magic as
it's
well.
gonna be a cutoff
Yeah.
if this thing's running, but now, so
In-
say
in
the budget.
reality,
yeah.
I'll tell you now, I would stop all the work that they're doing, trying to get this plant, the things he's talking about bringing up to working order, I don't even know if they're gonna work. So I would just stop all that until we have the engineering analysis done, and to tell us.
So this budget, what we're gonna approve, most of that's probably gonna go to a study to see how much it's gonna cost. to do
So,
that.
yes, a portion of that's
Okay.
gonna go forward, and then,
Yeah.
again, come to capital, see if it's a realistic number. The town, at that point, we have to make a decision. And with that said, even if we go with the Middleborough route, right? There's a third option too. We still have a plant, right? Could we lease that plant to a private developer, to help with the commercial aspect of town?
Sure,
So, there's still an
Right.
avenue of bringing this back up and running. It may not be the town running it.
could some of this budget go to offset the cost to Middleborough, that we're incurring with Middleborough?
Yes, I mean, that's what they're doing with it now. They're
Okay.
paying the Middleborough water bills.
Okay,
So if, you wanna, okay.
no, go ahead.
If, Glenn, the article does dissolve the North Carver Water District, when do they, in effect, stop having any responsibility?
That's a good question. So again, Senator Duna was here last night, and we asked her that question directly. So this is authors the select board
Right, yeah.
to petition the legislature to change the law, right? You know, she said it could be somewhere between 9 months to a year. Now, I will tell you, and I had a discussion again with him today, they have hired their own attorney, which again, is a duplication of effort, yeah, but they hired their own attorney. I talked to him today about if it passes at town meeting, can we put together intermunicipal agreement between the district and the town of Carver, because again, it's a separate entity, where we can really take over and go to work. They've been trying to hire an engineer. They put out, I believe, I want to say 2 RFPs. They have not been successful with that. The town has an engineering firm under contract. They do this type of work. We could hire them tomorrow. We could get the whole thing moving forward. You know, I also attended a DEP conference. DEP is upset with the North Carver Water District because they have not hired what they call a distribution system operator. I believe that the town could also step in and help with that if the North Carver Water District is out of the way.
One of my concerns is, they are their own entity, they do have the ability to obligate the town. So if they are dissolved in literally a couple of weeks, we've got to have something in place that prohibits them from obligating the town in any way. And they've got, they have an endless list of things. And some of them are big ticket. So we've got to be able to prevent that from happening too.
What, you said that you asked? What was the response?
The attorney is, he sees the wisdom in it. But how we work with the commissioners, we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
I would think he would get also, he would get pressure from DEP. DEP can't force them to do it that I know of, but they would give them pressure, you know, and look for the town to take it over.
Okay, any other thoughts, comments, questions? No? Okay. So the home rule petition is to dissolve the North Carver Water District. And if we, let's make sure we get the vote right. A yes vote is to dissolve it. A no vote would be not to dissolve it, as written. Everybody agree with that? Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second to dissolve the North Carver Water District. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? No, abstain, no, okay, so it's a 5-0 to dissolve. Thank you. Okay, investment of trust funds.
What article?
Article 12, the next one.
Okay.
And this would be allowing the treasurer to invest certain funds.
Correct. It gives her a little bit more flexibility on what she can, Terry and I didn't even know how restrictive it was for the, which is a good thing, you know. I certainly don't want the town of Carver investing in Bitcoin, I can tell you right now, right? You know, a little too much speculation for me. But this does, well, with that said too, if you look at our returns on some of our investments, they're not hopefully substantial.
There's a lot of municipal statute that prevents municipality. I mean, I'm treasurer of two regional school districts, and you're pretty restricted.
Yeah.
As to what you can actually do and what you can invest in. Investing is allowed, but very low risk types of things and so forth. But
And this gives her a little bit more flexibility.
this would allow more flexibility to the treasurer. So
All right, I'll make a motion to approve Article 12, investment of trust funds as written.
Second.
okay, so it's a motion by Tony, second by Beth. Any further discussion?
Was
Bill?
I just think it's a very uncertain economic time
It is.
to be investing in ETFs and individual stocks. And I understand that it's controlled, but
You know, the treasurer be on this, I'm not sure that we are even allowed to invest in individual stocks.
I
Does it say it
just,
there?
as it's written,
Okay, sorry.
it says mutual funds, ETFs,
Under
stocks
the-
and bonds. But I mean, even my S&P 500 is in the toilet right now,
Right.
you know what I mean? So I feel like it's a really,
But I think it says in accordance with GL 203C.
right, but I don't know what that.
Right.
Well, it also says it's a very short and restrictive list. And like I said, there's a lot of municipal statute that limits, actually limits what you can do. And you do it through, you know, a qualified broker, and you do it through a qualified municipal broker.
What are we doing now? Are we just like a catch fund or?
I don't know the specifics of it. I don't-
It's probably just Rockland Bank.
Yeah.
you know?
0.2%?
I don't know. So,
I said 0.2.
Point two.
I don't know.
That's
I-
0.2%.
Isn't that what your typical savings account?
Based on the returns, we're in that ballpark, so I can tell you right now that.
well, actually, they're not that bad. I do that for the schools, and, you know, we're into 4 and 5%. CDs, and the money markets aren't bad. And,
Well, that's
you know,
right,
I
so
mean,
the
that's
times are good for those right now, actually.
Yeah.
They still are, right?
not bad, not bad. So, any
That
other-
sounds like a pretty good return to me, especially with
0.2%?
the town's money, 4 or 5%.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, you can get that, yeah. So is there any other further discussion on this?
No, I just wanted to say that.
No, that's okay, good points, good points. So we got a motion and a second to allow the treasurer a little more flexibility in the investment of trust funds. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No? 5-0, so that's good, thank you. I don't know, is that our last one?
There's something highlighted here, Article 17, Part A, is that something we need
that
to
was-
approve? No.
That may be our last one.
Oh, no, it's Article 18?
We got 8, yes, we do have
Oh, yeah.
Article 18. Denial of licenses and permits by law amendment. I don't know why it takes a finance committee vote, but whatever. You got a,
Just so you know, so
Summary of
if
this
you're not,
one, Glenn?
if you're not paying your taxes, this will tighten up the time frame. And right now, I believe you can actually not pay your taxes and still get a permit in the town for at least 12 months.
oh, okay, Mhm.
So this just tightens up that time frame.
okay,
And, you know, which is something we normally do, we always check before we issue a permit,
yep,
to pay their taxes and,
Yeah.
you know.
okay. So can we get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to move forward Article 18 as written.
Okay, motion by Beth, second? Second. Second by Walter. Okay, any further discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No, abstained? Good, 5-0, unanimous. And that just might be,
Isn't there another water article? No?
No,
I didn't catch any others for the
I think it's
FinCom,
conservation and zoning.
so I think we're done.
that's it.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Mhm.
Thank you for your votes. Sounds good. And then we've just got some meeting minutes to approve. I sent those out to everybody. It's from the minutes of December 9th of '24, February 19th of '25, February 24th of '25, February 26th of '25, and March 3rd of '25. So we can do if anybody sees fit, we can do them as a group. If you've read them and not any issues, or pick out, if you have anything that needs to be corrected or whatever, we can also do that. So
Can we vote if we weren't at?
I was at,
you can,
okay.
as long
I
as you've
wasn't
read
there
them,
for
yeah.
the-
Oh, okay.
I'll call you in the morning, Glenn.
Okay.
You got those already, so I'll give you a call at 10
All right.
o'clock. Okay, good.
Okay.
Yes, you can,
Okay.
as long as you agree with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve all the minutes,
All the minutes that I
all the
just said.
minutes that you said.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we got a motion by Beth, a second by Tony, and we're gonna do, there's a little catch-up. And, any issues or comments? No? If that's the case, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, nothing? Okay. Thank you. So I'll get those into the office, and then they'll be posted on the website. Okay, and I think that I don't have anything else to bring up and so forth, and I think our next meeting is just gonna be town meeting. Having done this,
We don't have to meet ahead of time.
we don't have to meet
Yeah.
ahead of time, because these votes, we've got until the deadline for getting final writings into the warrant is the 24th. So we're ahead of that. Glenn he's already got it.
Yeah.
So ours will be in there. We will not have to meet ahead of time. So our next meeting will just be town meeting. Okay?
That sounds
Anything
good.
else from anybody? No? We thank you for your help tonight, and we just need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Tony, motion. Beth, Walter, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're done.
So
Thank
you
again, everybody.